For over 500 years, we've been told the same story about Christopher Columbus, a humble Italian sailor from Genoa, son of a wool weaver who changed the world in 1492. But what if almost everything we know about him is wrong? Recent DNA evidence has uncovered something shocking. Columbus might not have been Italian at all. His genetic markers point somewhere else entirely, to a community that was being hunted, expelled, and forced into hiding the exact same year he set sail. The timing is no coincidence. His silence about his family, his strange writing habits, his powerful friends who funded his voyage, they all suddenly make sense when you realize what he might have been running from. And the evidence has been hiding in his bones this entire time. Columbus is everywhere in our history books, monuments, and paintings. He's become this untouchable symbol of exploration and discovery. But here's what's strange. For someone so famous, we know almost nothing about his early life. No birth records exist, no school documents, no clear evidence of his childhood. Even his name appears in different forms in historical texts. This man, who meticulously documented his voyages across the Atlantic, left basically zero information about where he actually came from. And that's not normal. In the 1400s, your family background was everything. It determined your social status, your opportunities, your entire identity. So why would Columbus, this supposedly proud explorer, refuse to mention his parents, his birthplace, or his family? What was he hiding? Scholars started noticing problems with the official story as early as the 1500s. Columbus was supposedly born in Genoa, Italy, but he almost never wrote in Italian. Instead, he used Spanish and Portuguese, and even then, his writing was odd. The sentence structures were archaic. The word choices were unusual for someone from that region of Italy. His handwriting didn't match standard Genoese administrative styles, either. But the really weird part was what he put in his letters and journals. He constantly used religious symbols, crosses, strange abbreviations, and metaphorical phrases that sometimes looked like coded messages. Some historians believe he was deliberately writing in a way that concealed something. And, in a society obsessed with lineage and family heritage, Columbus chose total silence about his background. That's not just unusual, that's someone actively hiding a specific identity. Because of these suspicions, theories exploded. Maybe Columbus was actually Catalan, or Portuguese. Some said Greek. Others claimed he was from a fallen Spanish noble family trying to hide his shame. But one hypothesis stood out above all the others, and it's the most controversial. What if Columbus had connections to the Sephardic Jewish community of Spain? And here's where the story gets incredibly tense. In 1492, the exact same year Columbus sailed to the Americas, Spain issued the Alhambra decree. Every single Jewish person in Spain had to make an impossible choice: convert to Catholicism immediately or be expelled from the country forever. Hundreds of thousands were forced out. Families erased their identities, changed their names, and pretended to be Christians just to survive. They were called conversos. You weren't just hiding your faith, you were hiding to stay alive. If Columbus had ties to this persecuted community, suddenly everything makes sense. His silence wasn't mysterious anymore, it was survival. And the evidence starts piling up when you look at the people around him. Many of the wealthy patrons who funded his first voyage were conversos, converted Jews with influence in Spanish finance and government. His translator on the journey, Luis de Torres, was a Jewish convert who spoke Hebrew and Arabic. Then there are Columbus's own letters. They show deep knowledge of the Hebrew calendar, lunar cycle calculations, and Old Testament imagery that goes way beyond what a normal Catholic education would teach. And the timing of his departure is haunting. Columbus left the port of Palos just days after the deadline for Jewish expulsion. Was this voyage really just about finding new trade routes? For centuries, all of this remained speculation. Linguists analyzed his writing, historians studied the context, but there was no physical proof. Everything changed when modern genetic science entered the picture. Columbus's remains are kept in Seville Cathedral, though their authenticity had been questioned for years. The bones were moved multiple times between Spain and the New World, creating confusion about whether they were even real. In the early 2000s, a research team at the University of Granada decided to settle this once and for all. Professor José Antonio Lorente led a project to extract ancient DNA from the remains and compare it with Columbus's known relatives. First, they needed to confirm these bones actually belonged to Columbus. Then they could investigate something far more explosive: his true genetic origins. The team compared mitochondrial DNA and genetic markers from the skeletal remains with samples from Columbus's son, Hernando, and his brother, Diego. The results were clear. Direct biological kinship confirmed. The skeleton in Seville really was Christopher Columbus. This was huge because it ended centuries of doubt about where the explorer was actually buried. But more importantly, it opened the door to analyze his genetic background. Working with DNA over 500 years old is incredibly difficult. The samples are fragmented and easily contaminated. You usually can't reconstruct the entire genome. But scientists can still analyze critical segments, specifically the maternally inherited mitochondrial DNA and the paternally inherited Y chromosome. These reveal haplogroups that can be compared against genetic data from modern and historical populations. When the researchers ran these comparisons, they found something nobody expected, something that challenged 5 centuries of accepted history. Columbus's genetic markers didn't match northern Italy, where Genoa is located, not even close. Instead, they showed much stronger connections to populations in the Western Mediterranean, specifically the Iberian Peninsula. And here's the critical finding. Certain genetic markers were consistent with Sephardic Jewish lineages that had been established in Spain long before 1492. The researchers were careful with their language. Consistent doesn't mean definitive proof that Columbus was religiously Jewish, but it strongly suggests he had ancestry from this population group. In the historical context, this is massive. The Sephardic community had existed in Iberia for centuries. They were deeply woven into economic and intellectual life before being forced to convert or leave. If Columbus carried the genetic signature of this community, it explains why he never talked about his family. It explains his social network. It explains his entire life of caution. Of course, the findings sparked immediate controversy. Italian scholars pointed to documents in Genoa showing families with the surname Colombo still existed. They argued that ancient DNA, with limited data, can't completely overturn centuries of historical tradition. Independent geneticists warned that many haplogroups common in Sephardic communities also appear in other Mediterranean populations, making it hard to pinpoint exact origins. Even the Granada research team stayed cautious, refusing to make absolute claims and stressing the need to publish complete data in peer-reviewed journals. But despite all the reservations, the impact is undeniable. For the first time ever, Columbus's history isn't being debated only through old documents and letters. It's grounded in direct biological evidence pulled from his own remains. If future research confirms the Iberian or Sephardic origin theory, the implications go far beyond one man's biography. It forces us to rethink how historical narratives get created, standardized, and spread, especially when political and religious powers control the record. Through this new lens, Columbus becomes something completely different. Not just a symbol of conquest and expansion, but a man navigating fear, concealment, and a desperate need to escape an oppressive world. The 1492 voyage might have been exploration, but it also could have been flight, maybe even an ultimate act of survival. Columbus's story proves that history isn't some unchangeable truth carved in stone. It's a construct that shifts when new evidence appears. Ancient DNA, despite its limitations, has opened a completely new way to access the past, not to replace traditional history, but to challenge and complement it. We still don't have a definitive answer about where Columbus truly came from, but what's crystal clear now is that the man behind the myth is far more complex than the image. We've been shown for 500 years, and that complexity, revealed by modern science, transforms Columbus from a static historical icon into a living figure carrying the contradictions, fears, and hopes of his entire era.